You don't need to use an oversized AI model for everything, just like you don't need to use an axe to slice a cake. Find out how smaller models can deliver the right results and help cut AI costs up to 90% at IBM.com. The AI built for business. IBM.
Very recently, both the federal point-in-time, or PIT count, and Multnomah County's data on our area's homeless population were shared. And though both tallies show how serious the homelessness crisis remains on Portland streets, the county counted almost 5,000 more people. So today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with Oregonian reporter Lillian Mongeau Hughes to get caught up on where we are with solutions. We're finding out what the latest numbers and the discrepancy actually tells us, what every level of government is doing about the issue, and when we will have a clearer picture of what homeless services will look like in our city. It's Thursday, June 5th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Lillian, for a long time, the federal point-in-time count numbers were regarded as the gold standard in estimating how many people were unhoused in Multnomah County. But this year, that federal count and Multnomah's county numbers were out a few weeks apart, and they didn't match, and by a bit. So why the difference, do you think? And is the discrepancy something to worry about?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a little tricky. Let me rewind a little bit here. We call it a federal count, but really what it is a federally required count. So every organization across the country that gets money from the federal government for homeless services, one of the boxes they have to check to get that funding is this count. Weirdly, the amount that they get isn't super tied to the number of people in your count, but you have to do the count or you can't get the money. That money is from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So that count's been happening since about 2007. That's when it started to be required by the federal government. It, in a way, is still the gold standard in that it's a pretty accurate estimate of any given region's homelessness population, and it is the only number we have to compare across regions. In Multnomah County this year, in January 2025, they found that 10,500 about people were homeless in the county. One other thing to know about that count is it specifically tries to be a snapshot of one specific night of the year. So this was that's how many people they thought were homeless on January, I believe it was 25th this year of 2025. What Multnomah County has done more recently is published the results of its by name list. So a by name list, interestingly, is also something that is to an extent required by the federal government. You have to keep track of services that you give people, and you have to have a name associated with those services. But what the federal government doesn't necessarily require, and what Multnomah County has gone above and beyond to do, is deduplicating that list between providers, for example, and making sure that that list is up to date and super, super accurate, so that John in the blue tent isn't recorded as John Jon once and then John John another time by a different service provider and then counted as two people. So anyway, that number, which they've spent the last year working on, was in, I think March is the latest numbers for that right now. Anyway, they found 15,000. So that's about, 4,500 people more than were found in that federal snapshot. But Multnomah County is saying they almost don't care about the federal snapshot for themselves and measuring their own effectiveness as much as they care about the number that they came up with. So the working number for the number of people homeless in Multnomah County is now 15,000, and that is considered to be the most accurate number the county has ever had.
But will that affect federal funding?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we could get into what's going to affect us when it comes to funding, including federal funding. There is a lot to be worried about there. But no, the fact that the two counts are different will not affect our federal funding or any of our funding.
Gotcha. So what do both those numbers say about how we're doing on homelessness? Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? Are we hitting that mark of this is what we thought was going to happen? Or what are you hearing?
Well, this is a tricky concept to understand. This is one of those cases where two things can be true at the same time. We are doing worse in terms of the number of people who are homeless. No matter how you cut it, more people are homeless now than were homeless a year ago, than were homeless a year before that. That is seen clearly in all of the counts. So in that sense, we're doing worse. That said, ever since we started getting more money locally from the regional services tax, both Multnomah County and all three of the counties in the area have been serving far more people. So more people are getting sheltered, more people are getting outreach, and more people are getting housed by the county than have ever been before as well. So it's we're doing better providing more services, but we are not keeping up with the number of people who are falling into homelessness on a regular basis. And I'll just say briefly, the two primary reasons people fall into homelessness are, well, really the one reason is losing their housing. So that's what's happening. Evictions have gone up and people for various reasons aren't able to stay in like our very, very tight housing market. And that's the main reason that's coming up. And the Homeless Services Department at the county, well, they're responsible for a lot of things, isn't actually empowered to change that.
Well, there are a bunch of proposals flying around right now about how to tackle homelessness. And I feel like every level of government is giving us an option almost. So let's start with the city level. The mayor dropped his budget plan a few weeks back, and the council's been negotiating since then. So far, it looks like they're mostly aligned on expanding homeless services. Like, what's the mayor's plan so far? And do you expect it will make it through mostly intact?
This is such a good question. We're not sure. We're actually doing some more reporting here at the Oregonian on that this week, so you can stay tuned for it. I think that there are a lot of questions given the numbers that have come out from Multnomah County about the efficacy of his plan. Without even talking about methods, when he made his plan, he was working with different numbers. He was working with 2023 pit count numbers, which was what was available. And now clearly we're in a different situation. So even if every bed he has proposed building got built, it would not come up to the number of people that need a bed at home in Multnomah County, right? So that part, just right out of the door, whatever happens politically is going to be tricky for him. You're reading the tea leaves as well as I am on the city council and who's going to stay supportive of this plan. There certainly have been questions raised about the focus on emergency shelter. Loretta Smith in particular has questioned why the city is doing this at all rather than handing it off to the county. Traditionally, this is a county role. So that I don't know.
And is his plan still very much based on, like, we're going back to a shelter system, which is, it is controversial to some, but like, is it still, that's the plan? Like, hey, we're going to try to eradicate unsheltered homelessness first and then get people on their way and then focus on other things.
That is his plan, is to move people into housing through shelter, which you just sort of referenced this, but a lot of people object to that as the only way to get to housing. There's a significant number of people in our area who are moved into housing without ever staying in shelter for various reasons. So there's a lot of sort of philosophical questions around if that's the best way to do it. But yes, his plan has not significantly changed. I will say that the city is also proposing adding a number of outreach workers in this budget with the idea that they will help people connect to services and also that those outreach workers will coordinate better with other city agencies. So like, if your job is to like maintain bridges and that somebody's living under the bridge, well, you're a city worker, and the idea from the city they're saying is it's easier for that person to then just call home, right? Say like, can you send one of the outreach workers, rather than having to coordinate with outreach workers that are based at a different agency. So that's the other thing that he's added. He also cares a lot about day centers and has talked about adding day centers from the beginning. When you add up the cost of an overnight shelter bed and the cost of a day center, it starts to come close to a 24-hour shelter. So there's been some questions raised about that. And then the other thing is, given the tightness of the city budget, he's like sort of downgraded, if you will, some of the day centers from indoor spaces to potential outdoor spaces. So that's like, I don't know what'll happen with those either.
Well, how much of that, the mayor's proposing depends on money from outside the city? Because as you mentioned, money is tight inside the city, inside the county, inside the state. So where is the money coming from? Is that support already locked in, or is it still up in the air?
The mayor is counting on money from other places to make this budget work. Some of it is from Metro, some of it is from the county, and some of it is from the state. The county money is written into the budget, but the county hasn't voted on that budget yet, so it's a little hard to say. There's money coming from Metro. That is probably the firmest money. Metro has committed that money. They're sending it through the county, but it's like, it is money for the city. It's earmarked that way. And then the state has a little bit of both. They have money written in their budget to come to Portland, some of which like the governor has asked for and will probably be approved. But again, until they vote, we're not sure. Right. And then some of it is coming because it's required by previous statute.
Okay. So, it's coming.
Yeah, probably.
But I get why it's hard to be like, yes, it's here.
I will say that Mayor Wilson is very confident.
Okay.
And I think that we will know for sure when the votes are in.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, we're talking about the latest cuts to the county's homeless services. You can see over 50 large-scale Jurassic World dinosaurs, props, and scenes made from over 6 million Lego bricks in Jurassic World by Brickman, now open at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. The exhibition will also give Lego and Jurassic World fans opportunities to put their creativity and engineering skills to the test, with activities including island building, creating new dinosaurs, and even building escape vehicles to get away from a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this isn't just an exhibit, it's an immersive, interactive, and thrilling journey through the stories and characters you love from the Jurassic World franchise. Learn more at omsi.edu. That's omsi.edu. There are some big home games coming up this month for the Portland Timbers right here at Providence Park, like their Pride Night on June 8th when they're playing against St. Louis. They have a few surprises planned for the night, including a live drag show. And when you purchase a ticket for June 8th's Pride Night, it will come with a really super sweet limited edition scarf. I've seen them, and they're really well designed. On June 13th, you can cheer the Timbers on as they play against the San Jose Quakes at their Spirit of 75 night. That's when they'll be honoring the inaugural North American Soccer League Timbers team that started playing in 1975. The evening will feature a halftime recognition ceremony honoring players from that very team, and you can be there to experience it all. Go grab your tickets now at timbers.com. That's timbers.com. Well, meanwhile, the city is sorting this out. The county's dealing with its own budget issues. It's still deciding on its budget. Some cuts to homeless services are currently being negotiated in that budget. It's not final yet, as you stated, and I understand they're not planning to actually cut shelters. But what kinds of programs could be affected, post-negotiations?
Yeah, so a couple main things to know. Employment services was originally completely on the chopping block when the chair made her revisions, and the budget we're looking at now, that saves some of employment services, but not all of them. That's basically helping people who are currently or have been recently homeless to get back into the job market. Mm-hmm. There are legal services, a whole bunch of legal services provided for less than a total of $3 million. They involve things like, lawyers representing tenants in eviction court, which most tenants aren't represented and most landlords are. They involve things like helping to expunge previous criminal records, mostly misdemeanors and a few low-level felonies. Those are also things that prevent people from renting. So even if somebody could rent and has an income to rent and they have a criminal record, they might not be able to rent and therefore be facing homelessness. So a bunch of those legal services are set to be cut. I've heard that there's a few commissioners who are going to try to keep them, but that one's a really big question mark right now. The county budget also releases some number of outreach workers, though how many is a little bit unclear. And it slows down the addition of permanent supportive housing. So permanent supportive housing is when you move into housing, you have your rent paid, but you also have wraparound services to help you with other things you're dealing with. So mental health issues, addiction recovery, that kind of thing. It's one of the primary things people wanted when they voted for the homeless services metro tax that is bringing in most of the money funding this kind of thing. Anyway, it's very popular. They're not suggesting cutting existing units. So for people who are already in that permanent supportive housing, the proposed budget does not cut that, but it grows it more slowly over the next year than was in the original plan.
Yeah, that seems to be what experts are saying is what is most needed for the transition to be successful, since I think the first round of let's help the homeless population was just here's some housing for a year. Oh, it didn't work.
Yeah. I think that was the perception. Honestly, if you look at the county's numbers, because, we talked about that county count that gets to the 15,000. The other really cool thing about that database is it shows what services they're providing and how well they're working. And people who got housing 2 years ago, something like 81% of them are still in that housing. So they're actually providing, a lot of long-term housing. There's something like 7,000 people that the county has housed that are still housed with county programs.
And that's without the wraparound services?
It's a mix. So some people get the wraparound services and not everybody gets them. The debate about how many people need them is a question. Some people really don't. I think it's easy to think from the outside that everyone needs them, especially if you're looking at the people who are living totally unsheltered. A bigger percentage of that population probably does need wraparound services. A lot of people who are homeless, they're known in the field as invisible homeless, but we're not seeing them walking around the street because they're at their cousin's house for a week and then they're at their mom's house and then they're at their friend's house, or they're living in an RV, which is a little bit more visible, but is still like, it's a well taken care of RV, right? Like it's a different situation. A lot of those people, it's really just a poverty problem, and given a little financial help and some job stability, can get right back into housing.
I feel like that's the population slice that we don't hear most of because it's the one that is almost the easiest to fix. And so like all of the conversations are around like, okay, which one is the hardest problem to
That's
solve?
exactly right.
You know, so
That's
that makes
exactly right.
sense. Yeah.
And in that population, I'll just say really quickly, families with children are one of the people in that population. So generally with an intact family, the biggest problem isn't substance use. If there's a huge substance use problem, the family's often no longer intact, right? Which is its own separate huge issue. But intact families that are falling into homelessness, mostly again, like they've lost their job and they're one paycheck away from losing their housing. So if they lose their job, that's it. And so those families also pretty easy to move into housing. The primary driver of homelessness for women is domestic violence. Those people are often very easily moved into housing, but they just need housing because they have no financial background of their own.
Yeah. And that population also, I know, is like severely underdocumented because a lot of those people don't consider themselves homeless, especially if they have family support. So that also makes sense why.
And providers that are helping them are very protective for good reason of those families and mostly women who are in that situation. And so we get less news about them. It's very hard to get news about them.
100%. Like I was, as a child, was part of those numbers. And like my mom would never consider herself homeless. She was like, we were living with your aunt. You were fine.
Yeah, and she wasn't going to talk to the paper about it either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was like, yeah, we were fine. So that's the city, that's the county. Now we're looking at the federal level where funding seems to be shifting by the week. Or by the tweet, as some people have said. Are there any national policies or budget items you're watching closely that could have a big impact here in Portland, in the Multnomah County area?
I mean, Claudia, like everybody else, I am just like hanging on to the tweets. I guess the X's, I don't know what they're called anymore. I mean, it's like really hard to follow. I will say that an important thing for people to understand about the homeless population in Multnomah County is that there is not one stream of funding that helps here. So we mentioned the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That agency sends like rent assistance, for example. They send vouchers and they send the primary homeless services money that the county deals with. It's called the Continuum of Care funding. So HUD is really important, as it is called shorthand. Also really important for, like we were just talking about, domestic violence and young people. Those have separate funding streams through the Department of Health and Human Services. So Health and Human Services money also like all at risk. They've taken a ton of people, have like lost their jobs in Health and Human Services. Those funding streams are severely at risk, including people who are homeless and young, like between the ages of, say, 16 and 24 and unaccompanied. That money is at severe risk. I've done some stories about that. And then the other thing that's huge for this population is Medicaid. So a lot of people, whether we know about substance use, but another big thing that happens is people just with straight up disabilities and chronic health issues are also like at severe risk of falling into homelessness for a lot of different reasons. Those people depend on Medicaid. Mostly they're enrolled in it, especially in our state. If the Medicaid cuts and changes that they're talking about happen, we'd be in big trouble trying to serve that community medically. So there's a lot.
I remember last year we spoke of some new Medicaid waivers that would also provide housing.
Yeah.
Like, where are we with that?
So I was just at a national health journalism conference this weekend, and everybody was asking that exact question. And the answer is we don't know, because like one thing gets proposed and then it all gets debated, and then people on the Democrat side are picking their issues and then like standing up for them. So like, I don't know. I don't think, from what we have seen from this administration so far, certainly the new leaders of these agencies aren't interested in things like housing waivers. Trump's head of CMS was at this conference and got asked this question, like on the stage in front of all these health journalists. And she essentially said, I don't know that housing and things like it, the other things that Medicaid has a lot of waivers for various things. And she said, I don't know that that's our core competency. So she was like, I think indicating that those things were at risk, but did not say so directly. She kind of said, like, we want to focus on our core competency of like medical care. The argument for housing waivers is you can provide much better medical care if somebody is living inside than if they're living in a tent.
Yeah, it's also how they're seeing ACs as like a medical device now and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we don't have time to get into the state budget, since it's also, as you mentioned, still in flux with the legislature in session. But with all these moving parts at every level, at the city, the county, federally, when do you think we'll actually know what next year's, homelessness services will look like? Is July a realistic timeline? Like, when can we call you back?
It's a good question. I think July will be I think in July, we will know a lot more about the local budgets. Like all of the state budget, the county budget, the city budget, all will be adopted by then. The federal budget will probably still be in flux at that point, and I don't think we'll really know what's happening for federal fiscal year 2026 until the fall.
Because their fiscal year ends differently? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, their fiscal year starts in October.
Cool. Well, Lillian, I really appreciate you taking the time to break down your reporting. This is the stuff that we talk about almost every day. And it's interesting to be at a standpoint where you're seeing all the pieces kind of moving around the city, the county, the federal, and having this holistic view is really helpful.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. And I'll just put a plug. If you do want something more granular and you're listening to this, you want to learn more about those legal services or the things that are being done for families who are falling into homelessness, we have that granular reporting on the Oregonian, Oregon Live, and I encourage you to check it out.
And we will be linking to your articles
Yay!
In our show notes for this episode, of course. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Claudia. Have a great one.
And now for some events happening this week. Every Thursday on the show, we like to bring you a few recommendations to help you plan your weekend. Here's what we got. Tonight is the first Thursday Street Gallery in the Pearl District. If you haven't been to one, it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend you don't drive down there. Take the Max, a Lyft, or ride your bike or a Biketown bike because the streets get crazy clogged. Also this Friday, Montevilla's 5th Annual Strawberry Museum pop-up is opening at Zucker Cream's Ice Cream and Coffee Shop on Southeast 81st. It's kind of hard to explain, but just know they're hosting strawberry events every week, selling strawberry-themed items, edible and non-edible, and it looks absolutely delightful. So go check that out. And this weekend, don't forget to go see the dragon boat races held on the Willamette River near the Hawthorne Bridge. People are bringing their beautiful boats from all over the world to compete. Races are happening from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. And that's just scratching the surface. There's so much more. For even more local news and events, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland, check out our podcast guide for the month of June, or just head over to portland.citycast.fm for even more info. We'll throw a link in the show notes. Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.